Today, we're going to build all of this in Home Assistant 118 using the grid cards. It's going to be a long video, so grab your popcorn and a drink and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new dashboard. So in our configuration, we're going to go to Loveless Dashboards and we're going to add a dashboard. So click this yellow Add Dashboard button here. And we'll call this YouTube demo. Icon will be an MDI icon television. And we're going to create it. And I'll click on open to get into the dashboard. And right away you're going to see that we just have all of my entities listed here. And that's not going to do us any good because we want a blank dashboard. So when we click on Edit Dashboard up here in the top right, we're going to have the option to start with an empty dashboard, which is what we're going to do. And we're going to take control of this dashboard. So the first thing we're going to do is add a page to the dashboard, and I'll just call this page 1 for lack of a better term. And then we'll do MDI solar panel, because I like that look. There we go. And that's all we need. We'll leave panel mode turned off. And now we have a blank page on our dashboard. Alright, so after adding the page right here, we're going to add our first card, and our first card is going to be a grid card. And we're going to start off right away with nested grids. We want one grid card, and inside that grid card, we want another grid card. And the reason we're doing that is I need a single column to generate all the way down my page. That's going to be my vertical stack. So I want the first grid card to only have one column, and then everything below it I can put stuff into. But I need a container, which is what the first grid card is. So here is my second grid card, and I'm going to put a button in here. You can see here's the outside, kind of the vertical stack that we've created. And then this is the internal grid card that we're putting together now. And so in duplication of my other dashboard, I'm going to start adding a bunch of entities to this, or buttons. Let's go, we're going to start with our script home, give it a name of home, and then an MDI icon of home. And then we'll do toggle for this one because we want to be able to turn the alarm on and off. All right, we'll add another one, and we will call this one a button card as well. And we'll just keep adding all these button cards across the top. As we had it on our original dashboard. Star, we'll call that one. Another one. We'll do another button card. These are all my alarm controls. So this one will be stay. Call that stay. Okay. And we'll do a couple more here. This will be HVAC. And what I do with HVAC on this one is I have my alarm go into eco, or set my thermostats into eco mode whenever I leave. But if I'm only leaving for a short time, I don't want the devices to go into eco mode. So I just set the alarm, and my script does not use the eco mode setting. So that's what I call this one. So it's just a separate alarm setting for away or for staying or whatever, but without messing with the HVAC settings. So we'll call this one, we'll just put a fan on this one for now, and we'll add one more. We'll call this one a button again, and this is going to be, final script will be away, alarm away. All right, and we'll call this one away. And we will put a car on this one. And there we go. All right, so now you can see on this side, it's kind of giving you a visual indication of what you're building out. What has happened is I've got one grid card, and grid cards default to 3 columns. So this is one column of that grid card. So I have a grid card inside one column of the outer grid card. Once you play with this, it's not as complicated as it might seem from the beginning. So in order to fix this, we have to go into the code editor. Now I said I'm going to build this entirely in the UI. I am, except there's a few things that I cannot do in the UI currently. In future versions of the grid card, my understanding is that you will be able to continue to edit in the UI once you make, tweaks within the YAML code here. But we're going to make a quick tweak to add a column count for this first outermost grid card for 1, and already you can see what it's done. It's now 3, 3, 3, and 2, and if there was a sixth button, it would put it over here. So it's defaulting to 3 columns on my second grid card. So grid card 1, outer grid card, next grid card is this one right here. And so again, we will set this to columns 5. So see, automatically what it did here is it made those 5 all across. And so I have an outer grid card, and I have this grid card inside of the outer grid card. And then I set square again to false. And when I do that, you might have seen it move up a little bit. It was making a square here for this inner grid card. By taking away square, it now makes this one entity all compressed by itself. Now you can see that I haven't turned square off on the other one, it looks like, or I spelled it wrong. Let me just see what I did wrong. Yeah, so I need to do square on this one as well. So square false. And so now what we should see is just this one row of buttons that I created. All right, so now we're going to go back and edit this card, and you'll notice right now that I don't have a visual editor anymore. Anytime you put in extra code in the YAML, it's going to remove the ability to use the visual editor. And if I haven't mentioned this already, version 118, later versions of the grid card are supposed to have the ability to continue using the visual editor even if you edit the YAML directly. So in order for me to continue, I'm going to go ahead and remove these things I just did and make everything look ugly again. And I'm going to remove it from both of these cards, the main card and the one we just created, and just remove that space right there. And now I can go back into the visual editor. And now you see, again, we have this card is our main card, and then we have this one inside of that one. So I'm going to add an additional grid card inside of here to build our next row of buttons. So we'll look for grid card. All right, so there's our next grid card. And if you look here, here's grid card 1. Here's grid card 2. And we're going to add a button to this grid card. And this is going to be our alarm control panel. And it comes with a stock icon, so we'll leave it that way already. And we'll add a second one, which is going to be our HVAC state. And let me go back to this one. You want to make sure that you set this to more info, because when you're doing just displaying things, which is what I'm doing here, displaying the status of the alarm system, I just want to see the more info. I don't actually toggle anything on that. All right, so card 2 here, or button 2, is going to be our HVAC state. That's going to be for downstairs, and I'll call it down. We'll call this a fan, and that we'll leave there. We'll add another one, and this is going to be another button card, and this is going to be our HVAC state for upstairs, up, and then MDI fan. And finally, we're going to add one more alarm control panel. I separate these two alarm control panels on either side of this row just so I can tell the difference easily. So we'll call this a button. And I'm not using the alarm panel, I'm just using this to show a status. I'm not actually controlling the alarm with those buttons. That's why I don't use the alarm control panel itself. And we'll do, we'll call this one another alarm control panel, and it will be this one with this person's name, which I will not say out loud. And again, it's got the default bell icon. All right, so now we have this menagerie of a mess over here. So if you want to go in here and see how it looks as you're going along, you can always go back into this code editor and you can set the columns and see what we've got here. So we've got this row here, which when I go down here and set the columns for the next card to 5, these will all come together as I showed you, and we'll set the next card to 4. and these will all come together as I showed you before. So in order to continue to use the editor, visual editor, I will remove that piece of code there, go back to the visual editor. So now we have card 1 here, card 2 nested in here. I'm going to add a third card because I want even more buttons. And this will again be a grid card. So we have grid cards nested within grid cards. And for this grid card, I'm going to add a button. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to add a gauge card. So this will be a new one. So let me search for gauge. Here we go. And for this gauge card, I'm going to use this one as my outside temperature. So I need to find the outside temperature. And let me look at my old dashboard just to get the correct one here. So this is going to be sensor WH65B temp F. So we'll use this one right here. The name, we're going to call it outside. And unit's going to be Fahrenheit, and the theme will leave the same. And we do have the ability to set the minimum and maximum. So for me, I set this one to 25 as a minimum, and I set it to 115 for a maximum. And I can define severity in here. So I have done that on my other gauge. So 65, up to 65 will be green, 85 will start yellow, and then when it gets to 92, it'll be red. And now you can see kind of the outline of that. And I'm going to add another grid card. And this is going to be the outside heat index. So this is or another gauge card, not a grid card. Gauge card, and we will do for this one the outside humidity or heat index. So WH65. Actually, I just call this one heat index. So that's a feels like temperature. I'll call it feels like, or index. Let's just call it index. Unit again is Fahrenheit, and I have a minimum and maximum for this one, and that's going to be 25,120. And then we can set severity on this one as well. I think I set it the same way. So 65, 85, and 92. And there we go. All right, so now I have the first grid card with all of these items here, second grid card with these right here, and then my third grid card, I have these here. And again, if you want to take a quick look every time you add a card just to make sure it's flowing correctly, you can set the first one to 1. So this is right, and now this is correct. When I set these to columns of 2, then you'll see them all nicely done. And we'll do all this here at the end. I'll show you what this is going to look like at the end. All right, so there is that. And then a couple more types of cards here. Let me go back to Visual Editor. In my main container up here, I'm going to add yet another one. And these are going to be gauge cards. Not gauge, these are going to be bar cards. And in this case, I'm actually going to use a custom bar card. Some of the custom cards you can currently edit in the UI. Some of them you cannot. So, and I'll show you one a little bit later on in one that I wasn't able to edit in the UI. My assumption is this will continue to evolve and you'll be able to add some of these other ones. This custom bar card is actually added inside of HACS. So if you're not using HACS, you should install HACS. It's the Home Assistant Community Store where a lot of people have added their own types of cards and components to it. So we'll go ahead and use that one for this. So I'm going to click on it. And for this entity, let me make sure I'm doing the right entity. So this one I'm going to call sensor WH65B last update. And this is when my weather station last updated. And you can do a bunch of stuff down here with it, the appearance and everything else. What I did on this was I actually edited the code, and I can show you that in a little bit in terms of the way it looks. But I'm going to leave it as default for right now. Other than I think I will change the, let's see if I can find the icon. And actually, I will give it a title. We're going to call this one Last Update. And the bar, you can set all this stuff through the settings here. You can do value settings, position settings, severity settings, and this is the one that didn't work for me, that I had to put in the code directly. And then you can do animation settings as well. I'm going to leave it like this and add another entity card, or another bar card. You see why we're not... Yeah, and it looks like for some reason that went into... Yeah. So this is not letting me add another bar card here for some reason. So let me see what might be going on. I may delete this one and start over. So let me just try that again. So I'm going to add a fourth gauge card. Or a fourth grid card. And maybe I didn't do that from the beginning. And then for that card, initially I'm going to add this bar, custom bar card. All right, so I must have done that in up here instead of where I was supposed to. So let's just go with this. Again, entity is going to be, let me just look for a last update, see if it's easy to find that. Nope. So it's not actually searching either in the drop down for this. So I will type it in directly, last update. And again, I'll just give it a name. Wherever that is. I guess this will be last update. Update. All right, so I'm going to leave everything else default for now on that. Add a second one here. This is again going to be a bar card. So do custom bar card, and this is going to be for this one is going to be. Let me find the correct entity. RSSI value. Sensor. WH65B, RSSI, and this is a signal that I'm getting from the weather station. I did that initially whenever I was trying to understand whether I was getting enough signal for it to update correctly. So this is RSSI. All right, so that's what I'm going to do for those two. So again, we'll just do a quick check on it. Set our column up here on our main grid card to 1. And we've got those, and now we have the RSSI values. And this will all come together here in just a minute. All right, so next up, for one more card on here, we will do a, well, let's get rid of this first. We are going to do, or add just a glance card. So first it's going to be grid at the bottom, and then for that I'm just going to put a glance card. And I'm going to add 4 entities to the glance card. And this is going to be my Synology disk station stuff. And you notice it already puts a bunch on here. I'm just going to get rid of those for now. And we will say Synology drive status. Let me find it on here. Drive 1 status. And then we will do the next one. Drive status again. It's actually Synology status. Drive status 2. And we'll just copy this and do it again. We'll do drive status 3. Huh, that didn't work, did it? Drive 3 status, and then we will do finally the last one. And we'll find drive 4 in here somewhere. Drive 4 status. All right, so we have a single column card on here. All right, so that's all of column 1. So let's look and see how column 1 works when we put all the pieces together here. So we're going to say columns for the main card is 1. Square is going to be false. Not flash. How about false? And see how it pulls it all together. Now we need to go through each individual one of these cards and set the number of columns that card has for entities or buttons or whatever. So this one has 5. And we definitely want square off on all of these. The next one down, if we keep going, is going to be our alarm control and HVAC status. So this has 4 columns. And this will be a square false as well. And you see it renders this as you're typing it. There you go. So we have that row, and then we'll come down to our next grid card. This has a column of 2. And it's going to be square false as well. Now this last one, I probably could have done this directly with the card rather than doing a grid card, but I'm just going to go ahead and use the grid card all the way through. And this is going to be a columns of 1. Oops, this is the wrong. This is actually columns 2. We're still on that. We're on the bar cards now. So square, false. Okay, and this is where I'm at. This is the last one here. I could have probably just done this without the grid, but I just wanted to use the grid to be consistent. And this one only has 1 column, and we'll turn the square off on this one. All right, so what does this look like all together? So let's save it and get out of the editing part. So now what you've seen we've built here rather quickly is we built 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different grid cards inside of a main grid card. And so we have, 5 columns, 4 columns, 2, 2, and 1 column. And it makes a nice, concise little kind of a grid of your entities. So we are going to go back in and do the next row over. And now back in edit mode, we're going to add a second card. This is considered one card, one grid card from top to bottom with a whole bunch of other grid cards inside of it. So now we're going to add an additional grid card. And this grid card, we're going to start just like we did the other one, a grid card within a grid card. So grid card. And we're going to add a grid card. And this allows us to kind of build that hierarchy of cards. And for the first card in this one, we're going to do a weather panel or weather forecast. And right away, of course, we see that it's doing this weird stuff. So we would set this to columns 1, square off, or false. And then, of course, columns 1 for this one, and square false. And if we look at it now on the actual dashboard, we have our left-hand side, or our leftmost card, grid card with all of its contents, and then we have this grid card we're starting on the right. We're going to add a few things to this one as well to kind of give you an idea. So go back into the card and edit it. We're going to get rid of this stuff so we can go ahead and do our internal editing using the UI. And now we can show the visual editor. So I'm going to add, again, a few more button cards. You've seen this, but we'll just do it for the fun of it. So here is another grid card we're going to add. And inside that grid card, we're going to have a button. All right, so now we have all this convoluted mess over here. So we will come back and fix that when we do all the columns and squares and all that. We'll do that in a few minutes. And then we have, finally, another card which I use. It's called the home feed card. It's kind of a scrolling real-time view of what's happening within your configuration based on which entities you're interested in watching. So we can find that card, actually. I'm going to call it grid card first, because let's just be consistent. And inside that one, I'm going to call this a home feed. And you can see that it's here. If I click on this, you'll notice it says no visual editor available for custom home feed card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my home feed card entity that I've built out already within my YAML dashboard. And I know I'm cheating here. I said UI only, but this card is one card that I can't do, obviously, in the UI. So I'm going to take all my settings for that, and I'm going to paste it in here. Now, I didn't have good luck with this the first time I tried it. So we may have to do the way I got it to work the second time. So the type is custom feed card, and then all of my information from my configuration should be able to paste right in there. And I see here that for whatever reason, it doesn't actually do anything. Column 3, line 19 is bad indentation. So let's figure out what's a column 3. Oh yeah, okay, all these are in the wrong place. So you can highlight all of this, hold down your control key, your left bracket, and maybe if I move it over, there it is. All right, so maybe it does work this way if I get the editing correctly. See, and now it's put all my home feed in one single little ugly line right here. We will fix that now. We will go over to the code editor, and I'm going to start. That's the last thing I'm going to put in this particular column. So we're going to go over there, and we're going to fix that right now to make it look the way we want it. So columns for the first one is 1, of course. Square is false. Let me just copy this, and I can paste it every time. All right, so that's the first outer layer, and then this one right here is this grid card. Columns again is 1 for this weather card, and I probably could have just left it that way without using the grid card, but again, for consistency, I'm putting grids for everything. I'm putting everything inside a grid card. And then square is false, and then we come down to this one, which has 4 columns or 4 buttons, so I'm going to make it a 4-column card. So columns, 4, and then here we're going to do square false, and then finally here's our feed card, which is all messed up because it is in one single 3-column card. So we'll fix that again going down here. We will call this 1 column, and of course square is off on this one. So let's take a look at what we have done thus far. So now you can see you're getting a pretty good dashboard put together. And let me get out of the editor. So here's our initial card with all of the internal grid cards. And here's our second card with all of the internal grid cards. So I'm going to do one final column over here on the right, and I'm going to put some other interesting cards in that one. So some cameras, some media cards, and some thermostat control cards. So back into editor we go. Okay, so we're going to do one more column over here. I'm going to put some interesting cards in here, media control cards, some cameras or picture entity cards, and then also maybe a couple thermostats. So let's just add a third card. And of course we'll start with a grid card because that's going to be our outer container. And instead of adding a grid card this time, I'm going to add a single media control card, or a media control card, as my first card because it's going to be full width, one full column. And so we will change this to Roku. All right, so I'm going to add a second one, and you notice I'm adding these in the outermost level of the grid card because I'm not nesting a grid card for the media players since they're going to take up the full width of this one outer grid card. All right, so now we're going to do another one. So I'll do 3 media cards here, and this is going to be another Roku. And then finally one more media card. And you can see they're putting them side by side here. We're going to make them full length here in a minute. When we set that columns to 1, it's going to stretch them all out for us. So let's do media again, and one final Roku player, that one right there. All right, so now we have 3 media cards, and when we go to the code editor, let me show you what I'm talking about, just to make sure this is going to work the way we think it's going to work. Columns 1, and see how it makes it square? This is why we always set square to false, because it's too much. So square, false. And now it kind of shrinks them back down into some more manageable stuff. Now I'm going to actually come in here in a few minutes and we'll go back and do that. And we're going to make these the custom media players. And in fact, let's do that. So let's change these instead of media control cards. Let's name them custom mini media player. And this is another thing I installed through HACS. So if you want this, make sure you get it through HACS. See the difference here? Already it's pulling in the theme that we're using instead of having this big in-your-face blue looking stuff. And then it allows you to do some customization. You can do that in the YAML. So I'm going to change all 3 of these to custom media players. And I'm also going to point out one more thing here in just a minute. Okay, so now all 3 of these are custom media players, and so they're much better. To me, they look a lot better just because they don't in your face. I'm sure there's probably customizations for the other media player, but I'm just used to this one, so we'll use it. So I've made changes to the card types here in the YAML, and when you change something here, you can't use the visual editor anymore. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you change up here the grid card information, that's where your visual editor stops working. So even though I've made changes to this mini media player card type, I can still use the visual editor here. So now we're back to where we were before, because I'm going to add a few more items to this internal. Oops. Yeah, I want visual editor. And you can see here it doesn't know what this is in this particular kind of card. So you can't edit that in the UI anymore, but we're done here anyway. But you can edit the main item here. All right, so we're going to add a grid card now, because we're going to add a couple of things to the grid card. So new grid card, and for this grid card, we're going to put in some picture entities. So I'm going to do 3 different picture entities, and you have to use picture entity, not for I'm going to use camera. So you want to use picture entity, not the picture, just straight up picture card, because that won't work. So I'm going to use picture entity, and certainly not going to use my sprinkler controller there. What did I do here? Let's see if I can undo that. No, let me try that again. So something went awry there. So let's do a picture entity. And maybe I need to specify something else before I take it out of there. Picture entity. And then I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to call this, I think it's camera. And we will let's use the front porch camera. And we can say, I'm not going to, well, yeah, I am. I'm going to say front porch. And we'll leave everything else here as default. We'll add the next one, and this will be another picture entity. And we'll call this one camera. And for that one, I think I'm using the driveway. So here's the driveway here. I'm not sure the difference between this is required and then this camera entity is optional, but I don't know what happens when you specify them both. I'm not sure what that means exactly. It seems to work without it, but we'll try it this time that way. And then one more camera entity, or one more picture entity with a camera picture in it. There you go. And finally, let's put in camera garage. And then I'll just specify it here for whatever reason. I don't think it does anything. We'll just do it anyway. All right, so now we have 3 camera entities here. So we'll go back here and go through it. We have our custom media players here, which aren't controllable by the UI. And then we have our grid card that has our 3 picture entities in it. And so to wrap this up, let's do one more grid card in the main container. And we will call this, of course, grid card. And inside this grid card, we're going to put 2 of our thermostats. So we have thermostat 1, which is going to be climate downstairs. It defaulted to that, so I'll say downstairs. And we will add a second one, and that will be another thermostat card. And this will be climate upstairs. And we'll call it upstairs. And now we have this jumble of mess, of course, over here. Now we have to go back into the code editor and let's set all of our columns for everything. So the first grid card is going to be a column of 1, as always. And square, we're going to set that to false. So everything will come together nicely. And as we go down here to our next grid card, this is our picture entity card. We should have 3 columns here. And square is going to be false on that one. And then finally, we will have our final grid card with columns of 2. And square is false. And let's see what it looks like all completed. And this is going to be our completed dashboard built out entirely with the UI. I know this is a really long video, but it takes you through pretty much every bit of stuff here. So we have button cards, we have gauge cards, we have custom bar cards, we have glance cards, weather card, more buttons, a home feed card. We've got a custom mini media player, some camera stuff here, and then of course some thermostats. And this looks equally as good on the phone. So you can see here that we have all of these same entities on everything that we showed on our dashboard on the computer screen. All right, there it is. There's the dashboard. Took about an hour or less to build the whole thing out. Just make sure when you're building using grid cards and you do it the way I did, that you keep track of the individual inside grid cards. It can seem a little confusing, but as you saw, it wasn't too bad. So leave me comments down below. If you want to support me, I've got a couple links down below as well for Patreon and Ko-fi. And make sure you hit that like button, helps the channel grow, and hit the bell icon so you're notified when I make new videos, and we'll see you on the next one.